Up to 40% of all expat assignments to China fail. And the reason is that companies simply choose the wrong expats. Hi, my name is Julie Marks, and I'm the original China Expat Spouse, and I welcome you warmly to this episode of the China Expat Spouse podcast. So today's topic will be about selecting the right expats for your China branch or for your China operations. Why does it matter? Well, China is a very complex business landscape, and as I said in the intro, up to 40% of all China expat assignments fail. And we'll have a look at why that is. You'll get some insights. You will get questions on why selecting the appropriate expat is crucial, about how the economic growth influences the need for expats. And we will also look at some other questions like what are the potential consequences of selecting an unsuitable expat? What are the key skills and qualities that HR professionals should prioritize for their expats? And also, how can companies assess a candidate's cross-cultural competence? And there will be some bonus content, which, well, you'll just have to wait until the end of the episode to get to those. When you're choosing your expat to China, you really want to make sure that you are choosing the right person. Why is that? Well, let's just say not all countries are created equal. And China is definitely a very culturally distinct market, and for the past 20 years, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, it has been a very, very complex business environment. So anyone representing your multinational company there, you want to make sure it's the right person. That's one reason. Another reason is that if the fit is poor, it will cost your company tons of money, and I'm talking tons of money. We can talk about real numbers here. I mean, let's make this tangible, right? In total, I would say at least $250,000 is what your company can count with. So what are those costs made up of? One is the relocation costs in and of themselves. Then there's costs for living adjustments, things like language classes, things like getting them well settled, those types of things. Healthcare costs, which you wouldn't have to pay for in your candidate's home country, but which you definitely have to pay for when they are in China or they are abroad, period. Also, there's travel expenses, so both for the expat themselves, but also for family members. And usually with expat packages, there's some kind, at least the initial flight to China and the last flight when they're relocating for good are covered. Then you have the recruitment costs themselves, and you have productivity loss, which happens a lot with expats because there tends to not always be a complete match as to when the old expat leaves and the new expat comes in. And all of this together, you can count $250,000. So that's a lot of money. Also, what you need in an expat in China is that you need a very good blend of expertise and adaptability, right? Because you do want somebody who has the skills, obviously, but that's not enough. It's just not enough. Let me give you an example, not from my practice with my clients, luckily, but from my husband's company. So they had an engineer who was really good at what he did, but who simply could not cope with living in the location that he was assigned in China. And he declined the cultural training before he went because he's like, I'm just there to work, it'll be fine. And he ended up packing his bags in the middle of the night and basically running away back to his home country. And it's turned into a little bit of a standing joke in my husband's company. So they've turned this engineer's last name into a verb, and now it's pulling a ... I'm not going to say the name, obviously, is now seen for, somebody who basically can't hack it, can't deal with China, and has to go home early. So what do you do about that? Well, my company, China Expat Spouse, has a little thing called cultural training for technical experts. So this is a training where we talk about how you can get your people China ready. So the people who are good at what they do, who are experts in their field, in their technical field, to make them be able to hack it in China so that they don't have to pull a ... So how does China's economic growth influence the need for expatriates? I find that a really interesting question. Like, why would you even need expats there, right? If you have operations there, couldn't you do everything with locals? Yes, you could. But also there's the other direction where companies are asking, do we even need to be in China? Well, let's look at it this way. China is still the world's second largest economy. So if you don't want to forego that market, then yes, you need to be there. And Western companies are still expanding operations there because a lot of companies are not willing to leave the Chinese market to the Chinese companies. There is a need for global managers, obviously, with local understanding when we're talking about this. And we have to deal with something that there's a lot of local pride in made in China, right? Chinese are more and more convinced that they can do things at least as good as the rest of the world, if not better. So if you don't want to let go of that bit of the market, if you don't want to let go of that aspect of business, then you better make sure that the products you're selling are made in China. And all of these lead to one very, very easy answer. There's an increasing need for China-specific business knowledge, right? You need to have people who know the market, but also you will need some expats because they need to stay in contact with your headquarters. So what are the potential consequences of selecting an unsuitable expat? Well, let's put it this way. If you don't speak the culture, then you will have a lot of business losses. One example that I can think of is a German GM that was very much used to communicating in a very German way, if you understand what I mean, had a very tough time bonding with his, in this case, Chinese partners. And that led to a complete failure in the market. And the reason was, in Germany, what do? Work is work and private life is private life. And there is no, like, things like business dinners or none of that really exists. It always makes me laugh because when you speak to a German and you're saying, well, there's this friend of mine, and they're like, oh, well, how did you meet them? Well, we used to work together. Oh, you mean this colleague? Like, there's a very big difference between colleagues and friends. They're not the same thing, ever. Whereas in China, there is no distinction. Like, it's everything, everyone is a connection. So whether that connection comes from work, or that connection comes from your studies, or that connection comes from the town you grew up in, or could be a number of things, right? A hobby you do, connections are everything. And so if you have those very diametrically opposed cultures clashing, and the German manager in this case was not prepared to bond, to forge those connections, it led to a lot of loss for the company in question. That's one thing. Another thing that can really, really, really damage your expatriate assignment, or the expatriate assignment for your expat, is when there are unhappy family dynamics. I don't know if you've ever heard the expression happy wife, happy life. There's also another one called happy spouse, happy house, to make it more gender neutral. Anyway, when things aren't right at home, it definitely impacts your employees' focus, right? Any expats will be unable to focus at all at work if things aren't going well at home. And that's why a large number, we spoke about 16 to 40% of expat assignments failing. Out of those 40, up to 40% of assignments failing, a whopping 70% of failures of people returning home early are due to the partner or the family being unhappy. So that means that the person who isn't there to work is having a tough time, and is then saying, we can't do this anymore, we have to go back. There's a couple solutions to this. One is only send singles, but it's a little hard to tell people, oh, well, you're married? Oh, sorry, we can't, like, you can't take on that job. That's not really feasible. And another way is to just build support programs for expat families. And that's where China Expat Spouse comes in. So if you're interested in that, check out, I put the link below in the description box. Check out the support programs that we have. We have one-on-one coaching, we have group coachings, we also have some trainings that you could look into if that is something you're interested in. What are the key skills and what are the qualities that you as HR professionals should prioritize when you're hiring expats for China? Technical skills go without saying, right? You're not going to put somebody who's incompetent onto a position. But in addition to that, what do you want to look for? You want to look for high cultural intelligence, right? The so-called CQ. There's fascinating research on those things. I'll put a link into the description box on an article of what CQ is and how it can benefit your company. Also, you want to look for somebody who's adaptable and somebody who has an open mindset. You want somebody who has strong relationship building skills. I mentioned the guanxi, the relationships before. That's exactly where those come in. And it can sometimes help when they have already had experience in China, obviously. But if they haven't, then choosing somebody who has at least left his home country, his or her home country before, is super, super, super helpful. So in general, just look for candidates with diverse cultural experiences and make that part of your interview process. Like not just a nice to have, but to really factor that into your decision. So now you're like, all right, so cross-cultural competence is important. I get it, but how am I even assessing that, right? How can I do this? Well, there's a couple of ways. Let's look at some of them. So one is there are cultural intelligence assessments. So there's tests that you can do. And again, I will link to one of them in the description box, so you can check that out if you want. Also, there are tailored cross-cultural training programs, which is where China Expat Spouse comes in. So that's part of what we do. I would also highly recommend that while you're interviewing, that you create some mock scenarios to test adaptability. So that can be case studies. If your company has already sent somebody to China, have them come up with scenarios. Or again, if you don't know, China Expat Spouse can help for this. And also what I think no HR department can go without if they are dealing with China is to have pre-assignment workshops. So those can be for the expats. It can also be for the entire family. Remember how up to 70% of those 40% failure rates are due to the spouse or the family being unhappy. So it really pays to have the spouses involved in the pre-assignment workshops as well. And another thing you could do is you could pair your new expats with experienced mentors. So either people who have come back or people who are still in China. And if you don't know how to do that or you don't have the resources for it, there's a really, really good ambassador program that China Expat Spouse has. Well, this is turning into an ad, isn't it? Sorry. But yeah, so we can help. Come and check out the website. I'll link to it. All right, so now to the bonus content. I promised you some bonus content, right? So let's look at both some common pitfalls and some trends, right? So what are common pitfalls? One problem that a lot of people have is they're over-relying on technical skills. Then a lot of companies are ignoring the family adjustment needs that an expat family would have. And the third one would be to underestimate China's cultural complexity. So what about trends? Well, let's look at how can we localize roles for expats a little bit more. How can we maybe even shift towards hybrid expat models where you're partnering, where the so-called flexpats, that's a whole different story for probably another video. And also, hint, 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 companies investing in cultural training. So that would be another thing that China expat spouse can help with. All right, so where does that leave us? We have seen that expat success is beyond the technical qualifications, right? It's important to prioritize the cultural fit and the family dynamics. And we've also seen how China expat spouse can help with that. And to me, the key takeaway is really that preparation is everything. You want to make sure that you give them the pre-assignment support so that you don't have really bad regrets, or they don't have bad regrets, which leads to up to 250,000 US dollars in costs for yourself. What can you do? You can visit China Expat Spouse for more insights. So I will put the link to the website down below. Also, please, if you like this content and if you want more of this, hit the notification bell, subscribe button, and all that good stuff. Give me a thumbs up if you can. And also, please share this episode with other HR colleagues who could benefit from it. All right, I'll see you next time. Bye.